Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to the next Legal Lines show with Brek Pitcher. He's a Navy SEAL, Mac Thompson, Marine. They're going to talk to us about their military service, getting prepared to go into the real world, the military world, where your life's put on the line, the deployments while they're over there, and then coming back and how difficult it is to re-engage in the civilian world. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Mac Thompson and Brek Pitcher.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my Legal Lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith, make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show for the first time Brek Pitcher. He is a Navy SEAL, retired, and Mac Thompson, a Marine, both of them who have sacrificed their lives for us in a lot of ways, at least for years, and seen some of their friends literally sacrifice their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you on behalf of our entire state and our nation and my family and everybody I know for your service, and I genuinely mean that.
Appreciate
You guys are
that.
the cream of the crop.
Thank you.
Y'all are on the front lines, and y'all are what keep America alive, as far as I'm concerned. And you represent the best that we have. So kind of tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's start with you.
Brek Pitcher. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I joined in 2009 and exited in 2014. My deployments were mainly focused on AFRICOM theater, so in Africa. And
Speak two languages, as I recall.
I do. I speak a little bit of Pashto. I can survive, and then I can, I can spit out some Swahili, and that was a prime language down there at those times during the piratings.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard Swahili spoken.
Barayako, and they got songs and stuff like that and things like that. Jambo for hello. My career was spent at Special Boat Team 12. It's a SWIT community team over in Coronado, California. And that's where I did through my trainings and things like that.
Mac, tell me about your experience, kind of how you got involved in such.
I'm from here, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I joined April 2010, wanted to kind of prolong or get out of going to college, looking for some adventure.
It didn't work.
No, I'm back.
Graduating mechanical engineering.
I'm back. So I joined April 2010. Throughout that time, took me about 9 months to get through my schooling. I joined 3rd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion. Had a couple jobs there, and then through that time with them, I did 3 deployments, 2 with the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, and 1 with my battalion main body to Afghanistan.
And I've heard the Marines always described it, at least oftentimes, as the tip of the arrow in some respects. You're kind of the frontline guys that are going out there, and you were even maybe the very point of the arrow in some respects, as I understand your responsibilities, kind of scouting out in advance of the rest of the crew moving in. Is that right?
Yeah, the capabilities of my battalion, just by nature, were pretty specialized in the fact that we didn't need anyone else's help to do our job.
I think you said that's called a standalone unit?
Right, we stood alone. We had our own support, fire support, logistics. So we were able to operate way further than somebody that's somebody that's walking, as opposed to, we can drive 50 miles, 60 miles out and kind of help the main body decide what they're going to do from there.
And I understand you also, and of course, Brek assigned to a boat, 12 in Navy SEALs, so you're on the water all the time. Tell the folks kind of what your training was prior to being deployed.
So our training prior to deployment, you take one SWIC team and you break it up into troops. And in those troops, you have 3 detachments, which are made up of 10 to 11 guys for each detachment. And what they do is you go through a phase called professional development, ProDev, where you go out and you get qualifications, 100-ton boat captain's license, 100-ton diesel mechanic license. If you're going to be a UAV fighter, you're going to fight UAVs. Then you go through ULT, unit level training, and that's where you're put in situations you'll find yourself in overseas. And it's just nonstop of about 6 to 9 months of just, through evolution. Then you go into sit phase, which is where you kind of take it easy, finish up with the quals that you need to deploy, and then kind of just rest and reflect with your family before going overseas.
Okay, and Mac, I know when you came back from your first deployment, they kind of pulled you out of the crowd and said, hey, I got some stuff you might want to consider doing, and you did it to get additional skills likewise.
Right, yeah, I came straight out of my first deployment, volunteered to go to Afghanistan. And so just by nature, I needed to pick up some skills that I didn't have. So they quickly taught me how to drive a Humvee, taught me how to call for fire, mortar fire if I needed to. And so, small skills like that you have to have that you might not necessarily get straight out of your training.
And then, as I understand, additional training in Canada.
Right, yeah, I was part of Task Force Grey Wolf, which is a partnership with Canada in which we kind of flip-flopped, them come to us going to them. So I was part of us going to them to participate in their winter warfare school in Quebec City, Canada.
All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit because let's talk about the strains and stresses that develop because of the deployment, because as we've discussed, off camera before, nationally the suicide rate is extraordinary. We're losing 23, and some say much higher, soldiers a day. I read one every 65 minutes. And so obviously it's a tremendous burden, not only for the family of the soldier that's gone, but for the soldier too. And so kind of explain the consequences that y'all personally had to deal with because of the deployment, and consequences you saw your buddies go through.
I would say it doesn't even start with the deployment. It starts with you signing that name on that piece of paper. You're not the only one going through it. The missus at home, the children at home. It's one team, one fight. And even though you may be deployed, when you're home, you're not home. You're training nonstop because you know what you're going into. And I think that's the biggest stressor is that time.
So interesting. You almost have to check out mentally and emotionally and stay 100% focused on what you're training to do.
Absolutely.
It makes sense.
And even when you come home, you're thinking, oh man, did I prep that weapon for tomorrow's training evolution? Oh man, Chief's gonna get me for that one. You're thinking about all these things constantly, and you're thinking about where you're going constantly, and it's literally the largest form of indoctrination that I know of.
And so it's all encompassing.
Absolutely.
Takes all of you, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and relationally.
That's right.
All
right, same thing, Mac. Similar experiences?
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. We called it a battle rhythm. You try and keep yourself in a battle rhythm.
Yep.
So you're prepping yourself mentally, physically, because you don't want to be the one. You don't want to be the one that that lets everyone down, and that's a pretty hard stressor.
I thought you were going to say be the one who's killed, who dies, and that is not what y'all think first.
No,
you don't want to let anyone down.
Yeah, it's one team, one fight. You don't. Right. I mean, any mission is 100% mission success. That's the military's main focus. We're here for a reason. Let's complete our mission. Now,
amazing.
If we have casualties, that's part of the job. I mean, we signed a warrior's code. We live by a warrior's code, so to speak, and you still do. Especially at home with the wife.
That never ends, does it?
You're still rough and tough. You're still that alpha male that needs to be that alpha male.
So, I know you personally went through a divorce.
I did.
And it was because of the separation, all the demands that are placed upon you because of your chosen profession.
It was, and the divorce took place after I, got out of the military, which was even a surprise. But when you think about it, it's not, because I don't know how to.
She didn't know you, and you didn't know her anymore.
Exactly. I was deployed. I was gone. I was at home, but I was training, so I was never home.
And so there's separation, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, in every way. You had the same experience, Matt?
Yeah, I think he's hit the nail on the head. I dated my now wife, my girlfriend, all throughout my military career, through ups and downs. So I think that it took us a while to get to know each other again.
All right, well, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke, Meredith Legal Lines. My very special guest, Navy SEAL Brek Pitcher, Marine Mac Thompson. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. I'm very pleased to have on the show Navy SEAL Brek pitcher, Marine Mac Thompson, and we're talking about the demands on our military, both while they're in service and then when they retire. And let's continue. We were talking off camera that it's two different worlds. The world that you lived in before you entered the military and the world that you've lived in during your time in the military, and even still to some respects after you retire. Explain to me, Brek.
That's right. Yeah, it's ficky because, you know, before you join the military, especially in today's age, there's more of the youth that join the military from 18 to 26, who still live at home, who couldn't quite make it through college and things like that. So their families providing for them, so to speak. And then you also have the guys who are in the military, where the military tells you what to wear, where to be, what time to be there, what to do, and then they pay you. So it's a good safety net. And it's very different because now in the real world there is no safety nets. And the military is a huge umbilical cord that just pumps health insurance and all the benefits that come with your dangerous title.
Interesting.
That you carry.
I've never thought about that. So you almost become addicted to the military kind of providing for you.
Absolutely.
In a weird way, which is counterproductive to you separating from the military and engaging back in the civilian world.
And that's one of the things that scare people is that, hey, don't leave the military. Health insurance is expensive. What are you going to do for your family and things like that? And those are a lot of stressors that come with exiting the military.
Mac, you had the same experiences?
Yeah, I think that my experience is that they're trying to help. They have a program called TAPS. We talked about this off before this, and it's just not quite there yet. And so they don't. There's no way for you to ever replicate having a complete safety net in the real world. And so I think that coming out, you stumble around and kind of try and find your way, and that's where a lot of people sometimes don't get up from their fall.
And I know we've talked about it. You personally, both of y'all have lost acquaintances / friends, certainly members of your group, to suicide because of that separation from the military. It occurred in some respects after they retired. So what is the number one reason you think that's happening?
It's just stressors from being in the military. They especially if you are in an accelerated field to where you have to set yourself apart from the rest of the group and become that alpha male. I mean, you're competing against nothing but alpha males. So for you to keep that competitive edge, you're always thinking about work. You're always thinking about, okay, man, I got to beat this guy's run time. I got to do better in this next qualification round and things like that, mentally and physically. So there's so many stressors that come with that. And then you can also read like psychology books on professional athletes. They undergo the same kind of stressors and then that's how, the pill addictions come in and the drinking and things like that. And it's because of the amount of stress that these guys are put on them to perform and excel in their field. Because when you go overseas, these guys have been fighting their entire lives from when they were 7 years old. We've been fighting since we joined, since 19, so to speak. So
Right.
It's a totally different world. These guys know what they're doing, and we have to be bigger, better, faster, stronger.
That's another interesting
No room
new
for
lesson
error.
I've heard. I've never pondered that either. Those guys, even though we think of them as third world and all that stuff, are very good fighters.
Absolutely.
All right. So tell me, you back into the civilian world, and you've lived that kind of life that y'all described. Mac, tell me what you kind of encountered and how you dealt with it.
Yeah, I think that you go from having a huge purpose, even if you're not excelling in your job, if you're not getting promoted quickly, you still have that ultimate purpose. You have a job. And then you come out and your purpose goes from, prepping your body to be the hardest target that there is to kill to, am I going to wake up and go to class in the morning? Am I going to turn in this piece of paper that's got homework on it in the morning? And that's, you're trying to quantify your purpose, which you can't quantify school to a military experience. And so I think that a lot of people just have trouble finding the same purpose. I did as well. Have trouble finding purpose whenever they're out and they're no longer experiencing the highs and the lows, with their in the brotherhood that they're in.
Brek, what about you?
I agree with that. The brotherhood is an important part, and everyone says, "Oh, I miss my guys I served with. I miss my guys." You did everything together with these guys. If they caught you smoking a cigarette and that was the wrong thing to do, they were there with you. And if you excelled in your field and you achieved something great, they achieved it with you. So you shared everything together on an emotional scale, a physical scale through working out together, and then on a mental scale with trying to attack problems head on with a group. So I think that's a big thing. When you do get out of the military, you don't have that team connection anymore, and you have to go work a 9-to-5 job when you were told your whole life in the military what to do and where to go and what to wear. So you don't necessarily have
It's two separate, totally separate mindsets, goals, required actions,
Yes.
everything. And so you come back and you can't, and let's face it, life and death over here and, getting a bad grade on the paper or, getting fired from a job just doesn't quite equate to the same consequence.
Right.
Of course.
And so it's great difficulty. And I know neither of you, when you came back, necessarily had a guaranteed job. You couldn't get a job.
Yeah, I couldn't. I speak multiple languages. I got a couple degrees. I was a naval special warfare operator. I was a SWIC for 6 years, and I still couldn't get employed, even as a security guard. Which
That's nuts.
it blew my mind. And the whole time I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to be just fine.
A Navy SEAL can't get a job as a security guard.
I couldn't get a job. I was overqualified, and I couldn't get a job. So I created a job, and the next thing you know, it's you got the stressors of that as well. And so that's another. And you haven't even acclimated to society yet. You're still late for people not showing up on time on meetings, which you hold in high regard. But to them, it's just another day in the office.
Right, because you've been there. What's going through their mind.
And we've never
because they're saying Navy SEAL kind
Absolutely.
of mindset. Mac, what about you?
Yeah, I think that that the fact that people don't hold the same values, I think that's a big. It's a big point of friction, and I think that the same analogy. Somebody's late for a meeting. You expect someone to do something, they don't do it because whenever all of your experiences, you're told to do something, you do it. That's what they pound in your head at every boot camp. Willingness, obedience to all orders. So I think that I agree. Agree with what Brek said.
So the relational component we talked about. You had friends pre-entering the military. How about friends when you get out of the military? Well, how's that like, Brek?
I had a lot of friends before I went into the military, and then it's like somebody pressed pause on the remote. I went and did my thing in the military, accomplishments and whatnot, deployed, came back, had a family, got divorced, had a kid, came back, and next thing you know, these guys are still living with mom and dad, hadn't finished college, they don't have real jobs, and it's, I don't want to be surrounded by that because I've been held to such a higher standard for something greater than myself.
You're not even that person anymore.
No. And it's, you don't even realize the symbiotic relationship you had with this individual.
Mac, same experiences?
Yeah, I think that it's almost a filtering process in a way. You kind of learn who really cares about you, and in a sense, you kind of can help. It helps you to see through people who you hadn't seen in 10 years, and they try and act like you're back in high school. I think that having, I think that in a way it was a good thing because I found who my real friends were here in town.
All right, we'll continue this on the last segment. This is Locke, Meredith of Legal Lines, Navy SEAL, Brek Pitcher, Marine, Mac Thompson. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Document your claim. What do I mean? Whenever you present a claim, whether it's for injuries in an automobile collision or for a breach of contract case or a business claim, it all boils down to documentation and evidence. For example, when you go to trial, basically both sides are presenting their evidence of what they believe to be their case. For example, also, if you're involved in an automobile collision, document the event. Talk to all the parties who are involved. Get their names, address, contact information, insurance info. Talk to the witnesses on the scene. Also get their contact information. Take photographs. With the phones we all have these days, everybody can take a picture, and that paints 1,000 words. So document your claim. The Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is document the claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back. I'm Locke Meredith. This is Legal Lines, and I have Navy SEAL Brek Pitcher and Marine Mac Thompson. We're talking about the trials of being in the military and, frankly, the trials of life out of the military. So it's interesting. I've talked with a lot of guys, those two colonels I just met with. It's so difficult for a soldier to say, I need help. I mean, the whole mentality of a soldier is, I'm tough as nails, ain't nothing gonna stop me, I can get through anything, and I'm not gonna let my brother down. And then to think, oh God, if I say, look man, I'm struggling here, are they gonna think less of me maybe? Or the other people are gonna, it's gonna affect work if I somehow say, look, I'm depressed, I might have post-traumatic stress syndrome. Is the frickin' government gonna take away my rights to a gun? Target me because I'm a military dude that sought help? You know, so let's talk about that. What was that situation for you, Brek?
I think that is true. You know, you don't want to be the guy in the room that has a problem. You don't want to raise your hand and say that in front of a bunch of other alpha males. You know, you were bred to kill, exactly, and or shunned or outcast. You might be the leper in the group that they don't want anymore because you're struggling with A, B, and C. You know, even though there are things in place to help with A, B, and C, you just don't want to be that guy who drinks too much at the party, or who says he's having psycho type problems, or any kind of problem, or oh, my arm hurts, or anything. You don't want to be that guy.
Any weakness at all.
You don't want to be
mentally, physically, in any way.
That's right.
Mac, what about you?
Yeah, I think that it's part of the culture not to take yourself out of the fight by saying something hurts, something's wrong. I think that not being a part of something does more harm than it would. In my mind, when I was there, I didn't want to remove myself from training. I didn't want to remove myself from a deployment because I needed help or because I was hurt. So I think that coming into the real world, you're internalizing everything. I think that mentality keeps itself, very strong in your brain, and the fact that you're walking around and you may have all these problems and people are smiling at you and waving and saying, hey, how's it going? And you're not happy, but you're smiling back, and that's just kind of something that you learn how to do, and it becomes a negative thing when you bring it back into the real world.
And obviously it affects relationships.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
The few that you may still have.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you don't have your brothers who's had the same life experiences as you right there with you, going through it with you, what do you do?
I think that in my experience, like I told you, my parents called it a turtle shell. I shelled up. I was probably drinking too much. I was, piddling around. I was working. I held a job, thank goodness, but I wasn't healthy. So I think that it took my parents taking me into their bedroom and saying, you need to step back, and this is going on. And I finally was able to realize that what I was doing was not going to continue to work. And so I think that carryover of the mentality that you have from military experience, it doesn't translate into the real world.
Brek, same type of scenario?
Agreed. Yeah, I was at the time I was struggling with my divorce, and this is when it really hit me that I never had the nest egg of the military anymore. Excuse me. The divorce came through, and then the custody battle began for the child.
Oh God.
And it's a rat race. But this custody battle, in particular, I'd lost the house in the divorce. I went through the divorce. Ended up, in the beginning, lost the access to the child only because until things kind of thawed out.
Right.
And it really hit me when I had my daughter, and I didn't have shelter to take her. I was living out of the back of my excursion, and I was also running my company. And at that point in time, I had to rely on my father to shelter us for her to have a roof over her head. And then that kind of took place, and then the drinking started because I was depressed about that, and then that whole world kind of compounded. And I just had to, one day I looked at myself and I said, this is pathetic. You can't continue. This is not going to work.
Right.
Your daughter expects more of you, and that's what really was my main motivator. Get up, start something.
And you did.
I did. I called a teammate of mine down to help me run my company because it was growing. And now it's full of my teammates, and we own the company together. And we have other teammates who work for us, 1099, go all over the world for us. We help veterans locally here. We're part of a bunch of veteran programs here.
And let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know for you, you got married 8 months ago, and you like we've talked about, you started going back to school and about to graduate mechanical engineering, and y'all both survived this miserable time of life of transitioning, but you went through what apparently pretty much every daggum soldier goes through. And so tell me about the business.
So my company, Elite Operations Services, we conduct tactical training for military, law enforcement, and civilians. We feel, to be a Naval Special Warfare operator, both SEAL teams and SWCC teams, we feel like we're doing our due diligence and our duty to protect civilians, to protect the ones they love. Because if a Red Dawn event was to happen, civilians, the United States of America is going to have to come together again. And, we feel like we're doing our duty to do that.
And you're offering your services not just to the government, whether it's federal, state, or local, but to private citizens. They
Absolutely.
can come in from something as simple as learning how to shoot a firearm to having, intensive training in situations?
Yeah, it's a full immersive environment. So these guys, they'll come in, they'll put night vision on, they'll get rifles. We'll wear pads, strike in the face, things like that, to re-simulate an anti-home invasion event. For example, how do I get to my kids safely if there's guys with guns in my home? Especially with the crime rate in the world.
So I assume there's all kinds of different scenarios y'all provide training for. All right,
Yes,
well,
sir.
that's great. So let's talk about guys. What programs, you brought up TAPS, okay? What is the deficiency with that program?
I think that it works in teaching you, what employers are looking for. It teaches you, the Bureau of Labor sends a representative, and that it's a pretty thorough class on resumes and stuff like that. But I think that the disconnect is in the mental health battle, and you're going to need to set yourself up for some mental health battles, because I think, the struggle's in your soul. The struggle's in your soul. If you tell yourself, I need to get up and do this, you'll do it. You got to tell yourself that, So I think they arm you to go out and find a job, but there's no way for them to arm you to battle yourself.
So should they just assume that you're having that battle and just give you the talk, the soldiers, as they're preparing to leave, and not wait for you to come to them?
That's a gray area. I mean, I think that there's.
Why do you say that's a gray area?
Well, because I think that if you assume everybody needs something, then people won't pay attention that don't need it.
Interesting.
Where they could profit from it. So I think there's so many briefings and PowerPoints that you go through that if you just gave them a whole main body, another one, they may tune it out.
It's so interesting. And so, Brek, what would you tell folks, your brothers that are kind of getting ready to encounter this new life called civilian life?
Get ready. No safety nets. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to help you. So there's no help. No one's going to extend a friendly hand to you. I mean, there may be very good people out there who help veterans. I'm sure there is. There's lots of organizations, but in my experience, you have to gear up and do it yourself.
Relationships are the key.
Yep.
Brek, Pitcher, thank you for your service.
Thank you for having me.
Thompson, thanks
All
for
right.
your service.
Appreciate
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Locke, Meredith, Legal Lines. We'll see you next time.